Minister, Excellencies, distinguished guests, we've been given 5 minutes, so it's hard to cover all the terrain that we would like to traverse. But let me cover two parts, the international landscape and the Nepali rationale. Now, 15 years ago, I had the honor of co-leading a pioneering global study called the Investing Across Borders that analyzed FDI regulations across 100 economies. The conventional mantra then was just foster the investment climate. So this touched on openness, rule of law, ensuring private property, contract enforcement, no expropriation of private property, etc. And then basic human and physical infrastructure, and ensure reasonable transaction costs, the legitimate kind that comes through remoteness or macro instability, and also the illegitimate kind that comes through bad governance and corruption. Now, this was not helpful. This was not at all helpful, and this was realized even within the IFIs. And because the logical lesson of all this was to attract more investment, you need to be like a country that already attracts a lot of investment. So from a policymaker's perspective, this was not helpful. So this led to a more second-best kind of analysis where we dive deep into FDI-specific regulations. And this is where we came up with a universal corpus of policy concerns. So this involved, how open are you to foreign equity participation in sectors like light manufacturing, which was almost 100% open in almost all countries, tourism, banking, insurance, and then there was a whole continuum leading to more illiberal sectors, including the media and even transportation, particularly aviation sectors. So foreign equity openness was paramount. Then came regulations to setting up foreign subsidiaries. So this is like the foreign counterpart to what we're all familiar with in the form of the doing business indicators that tracked procedures and number of days that it took to formalize a domestic entity within the borders, right? And also leasing of industrial land, etc. The third, perhaps very important topic was often under-discussed, was arbitration of commercial disputes. Is there a special statute for commercial arbitration? How long does it take to enforce an arbitration award? So this is of paramount concern to many foreign investors. The fourth was converting and transferring currency. So this was very important. And finally, recruitment of skilled expatriates. In Nepal, one hears that this remains a big issue. But all this, FDI-specific regulations is still not enough. It is necessary, but not sufficient. So this is where country attributes come into the picture. So if you are India, if you are China, if you are Brazil, if you are South Africa, you can afford to get away with deep, meaningful reforms because you compensate that with a large domestic market. But if you are a Nepal or a Singapore or a Poland or a Jordan, then you need to marry these reforms with country-specific attributes. So this is where the labor quality, the market size, growth potentials, your strategic location, and other links. So it could be contiguity with larger markets, it could be colonial ties, it could be common language, it could be currency, it could be diasporic engagements, etc. So against this backdrop of what we know in the academic and the policy literature, where does Nepal stand? I think we have 3 Ds to offer. The first one is demography. We're the oldest nation state in South Asia, but the youngest country in the region, with the median age being 25, a young, trainable labor force, tens of millions of whom are now abroad. But they can be tempted back if we get the economy going and investment going, and if they can be sufficiently incentivized. So demography, I think, is a big draw. Second is distance, our proximity to both India and China, and the new geopolitical imperatives that Rameswarji touched on, I think, is very important. And with this comes the issue of, how big a pie are we talking about? The quantum of finance, the source of investment, and the markets that we're talking about. Now, there's a striking statistics when it comes to FDI flows. In the year 2000, the first peak in the current era of, the latest era of globalization, FDI inflows peaked at about $1.4 trillion globally. But the share of developing countries, including India and China at the time, was roughly $220 billion. Now, we reached a high of about $2 trillion in FDI inflows in 2015. Just before the global financial crisis, it was 1.9 trillion. And after COVID, this has dipped to about the same level that it had reached 22 years ago. So that's $1.4 trillion. But now, the share of developing countries in that overall global pie is almost $1 trillion. So the financial landscape has also evolved. So this is the second D, the quantum of finance, source of investment and markets, allied with the fact that we share contiguous borders with both these large economies. Third is decarbonization. Now the mantra here has been, all paths to net zero. And this was put memorably by a columnist in the New York Times, that we need to make electricity clean. We need to produce much more clean electricity, and we need to make almost everything run on clean electricity. This is it. This is the simplest of mantras leading to net zero paths. And here, I think Nepal is very well placed, as has been highlighted already by previous speakers. Now, what areas to look into? There's the domestic wing and there's the foreign arm. Within the internal realm, I think the pace of urbanization, the growth of our cities, the massive internal and external migration, and the critical financing deficit in infrastructure, the logistics policy was mentioned. There's so much to be done within the Nepali borders. But something of concern to LDCs like us is, can we attract foreign investment that also connects us with foreign markets? Right? So it's not just the funds that flow in, but do you come with technology that is adaptable, that is borrowable, but do you also bring your market with your investment? And this is where I think clean energy and green reindustrialization, there's a massive potential, but green reindustrialization that is tied, that is allied with the global and regional value chains. So this is very important. Second, products that can be branded with the Nepali brand. So this is high value agriculture. We're seeing some glimmers of hope in tea, in cardamom, in ginger, in honey, etc. But this ought to be scaled much wider. But an area that excites me greatly is digitalization. As a landlocked country, all the other shipping-dependent trade really penalized us. This is one area which negates those traditional handicaps for us. And I'm a pro bono chairman of an institute that led a landmark study a year ago on quantifying how many freelance digitalization workers are active in Nepal and what is the aggregate inflow of foreign earnings through these activities. And it's massive. It's almost, even a most conservative estimate is that it's half of official merchandise exports right now, but many colleagues in the industry tell us that it's actually 3 times larger than that. So just in 2020, 67,000 young freelancers brought in over $300 million. There are tech companies crossing the chasm from service to product now. And there's amazing fintech entrepreneurs active right here in Kathmandu. Recently, one of our friends launched the world's first borderless neobank connecting the United States and Nepal. The global security companies valued at over $100 million operating right here in Balwatar. There are global analytics companies, global health companies, and global AI company that is about to go public on NASDAQ in New York. So this is an exciting terrain that ought to tempt many forward-looking investors. Now, what ought policymakers to do then? And I conclude with this. I think first, we project a national vision, prioritize sectors. Economists in the room will note that the discussions around industrial policy have been discredited. Now it's again coming back in favor, particularly with the United States, President Biden leading many legislative achievements, the Investment, Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the chips, the semiconductor revival, cumulatively worth about $2 trillion. And this has been mimicked by all other OECD countries. So the stuff that we read in the 90s and the 2000s about how horrible industrial policy used to be is again gaining favor. This is where countries like Nepal would also, with the understanding of our major donor partners, to also really focus on targeted sectors to overcome market and coordination failures. Second is this need to signal to investors constantly. This is a never-ending process, and this is where I welcome and I commend the Minister of Finance for issuing new amendments to the Industrial Enterprises Act, to the Foreign Investment Act, to the Special Economic Zones Act, to the E-Commerce Act, to the Civil Aviation Act, forests, land acquisition, parks, and environment. But the trouble in Nepal is how we execute this, and I hope we would be able to show improvements there. And finally, when it comes to foreign investment, nothing beats that pioneer, that anchor investor who comes in and really leads the way for others to follow. So I'm talking about Intel in Costa Rica, Intel in Vietnam, that really led the way for 200 other firms. If your country is good enough for Intel, it's good enough for me. So that logic, I think, is really important to follow. But there are other strategic initiatives. So in the case of Nepal, of course, Make in India, rise of China, etc. are there that I've alluded to. But the duty-free, quota-free facilities that we had as an LDC, Bangladesh made fantastic use of that. We couldn't because of our own internal problems. Given the transition periods, etc., there's a generous period that we can take advantage of, but sequel to LDC graduation, there are country-specific trade and investment treaties that we need to work on with the EU, with the US, ASEAN, Japan, Korea, etc. But it's that kind of country-to-country specific ties, and investors attracted and tempted from those particular markets that will do the trick when it comes to anchor investment. So let me stop here. Thank you.